Hello, my name is Anna Katrina Shidletsky, and I'm CEO and founder of a company called Instrumental. We make software to help companies find and fix issues on their manufacturing lines based on my own personal experience as a mechanical engineer at Apple, working on some of the most complex supply chains and also manufacturing lines in the world. So really excited to be here talking about data transparency. While EMS companies and their ODM and brand customers need each other to be successful, each has their own commercial motivations. And any customer who's ever dared to ask for unfettered access to their manufacturing data has probably faced at least some resistance, if not a resounding no. But this is pretty short-sighted. At least many technologists looking to transform manufacturing with data-hungry AI tools think so. I've spent a decade working with electronics brands, and Andrew Scheuermann, CEO of Arch Systems, has spent a decade working with electronics manufacturers. We've gotten to see this play out from both sides. And we've also gotten to see early adopters buck the unease and reap the benefits of shared data sets. So we're going to get into it and talk about what those benefits are, why there are resistances. Andrew, please introduce yourself and what Arch Systems does.
Thank you, Anna. Great to be chatting with you today. So I'm Andrew Scheuermann. I'm CEO and co-founder of Arch Systems. We bring AI-guided actions to the factory operations. As you were saying, we have a focus on EMS, companies with their own factories, so help them improve downtimes, deviations, and delivery issues by leveraging their data. The core challenge is that there's not enough expertise. So if every factory was just full of 20-year plus experienced experts with plenty of extra time, we wouldn't have a place. But because the reality is that those people are retiring in droves and new people often leave more quickly, the ability to leverage the data to guide those actions, improve a downtime faster, is a huge competitive advantage for a factory.
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting analogy to what Instrumental does, where we sell to the brand side, so the engineers, the designers of the electronic devices who are purchasing services from the EMS provider, and they're using data from the manufacturing process to figure out where there were problems with their designs so they can make changes to them. And if everybody also had 25 years of experience building the next generation mixed reality, AI-powered humanoid robotic thing, then you wouldn't need Instrumental. But there's just so much insight that you can get from actually analyzing that data and making smart decisions about how to change the design. So it's very interesting, the corollaries between the two technologies, but also selling to two different sides of the market. And so that, I think, is what's interesting about this conversation, because both of us rely on massive amounts of data, and there's an interesting challenge between our two respective customers where they don't really often want to share that data. And generally, I think it's probably because there's not really commercial incentives to do so, or maybe they make money by not being so transparent about the data with each other. And so maybe you could start by sharing the state of data transparency as you see it between EMS and ODMs or brands. What do you see?
Yeah. So in terms of the current state, I see data sharing happening on an as requested basis and essentially never proactively. But a lot of data sharing on that as requested basis. So from the manufacturer side, if the brand comes and they say, hey, we need to work on this together, I need data from X, from Y, these machines, these processes, the CM wants to share that when they've been asked. But is it like an ongoing
data stream, or is it like, here's a download from the last 5 days when we had the problem?
Yeah, exactly. Well, if you take a step back, you postured, do they possibly benefit from not sharing data? And I think sometimes, we're going to unwrap maybe the layers of the onion in this session. At its core, the factory and their customer, they are in a tight partnership where they should want to share this data.
They both benefit when they ship lots of product.
When they ship lots of product on time, the factory gets
with low
more
fallout
business.
And high efficiency and high uptime and Yeah.
The factory makes more use of its machines. They have less scrap materials. They get more business from the customer. In the case of ODMs versus EMS, they can even evolve their whole business model when they've proven that they can get higher levels of quality and they're not having to handle the repairs and the returns as much. And so there's a huge advantage from being able to do it. So I guess I'll close my first thought here, which what's the state? It's on an as request basis. How much do they really share? Not much. But it's sometimes out of a fear of this is going to be complex. I don't know how hard it is to share. I don't know what's involved. And then they retreat sometimes into a position of I've got to protect my costs because they are extremely sensitive about costs.
Yeah.
But it comes from not feeling enabled to easily share, which of course could be a far better outcome.
Yeah, so I think my perspective is similar in that it's only as requested. Generally, I sell into the brands who are the customers of the EMS. So like, the customer can make requests that generally are followed. And in order to use Instrumental, they essentially have to open up a live stream of their data, like the data's leaving the facility. And so this is why it's kind of this like, usually a slightly uncomfortable moment for a few seconds there until, the manufacturing partner ultimately often ends up on board and leverages it and sees it as this huge boon that they're not even paying for that can really help them get to those mutual goals. I think the reasons why, at least from the brand's perspective, why the factory doesn't want to share this data more openly is a sense that the factory would be revealing information about their cost structure that would weaken their negotiation position in like future conversations about like how much are you actually making on me? What is your actual margin? And is that what we talked about, or is it different? And part of that may be because it's like, particularly in consumer electronics and kind of some of the, what do you call it, much more mature electronics manufacturing disciplines, they've just been like ground down over like 2 decades of like shave a third of a cent, 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 and it's just like there's not a ton of margin really left to shave. It's hard to get that efficiency. So I think there's certainly like this fear of sharing information that would reveal, like, would be helpful in a negotiation about the commercial terms.
Exactly right. Yeah, I mean, if I could just build on that, that's definitely a top concern. Like, you're probably operating as a large EMS below 10% margin, maybe below 8, maybe below 5, especially in areas like consumer electronics. Margins are extremely thin.
Yeah, it could be as low as like 4.
Yeah, in medical devices, high reliability industrial spaces, you might be in the 8 and the 10. So if you're operating at 4% margin, and then you negotiated your quote initially, if the brand were able to find out, oh, we're doing this 20% faster than we thought and we need less resources, the brand might go, hey, great, we should get a cut out of that. Yeah, and so that is a real fear. But at the same time, the other fear, and maybe I'm curious if you've seen this, Anna, too, is we've seen when the brands come into the CM, the Flexes and Jables and Sanminas of the world, in that initial quoting period, they also might be really interested in what's the data infrastructure. I want to get some stuff out. And the CM, before we existed too, they would always quote that by themselves. They would have a services team and they're trying to do low-cost labor and do all this infrastructure. And anything that happened after that initial contract is a cost plus.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not going to be able to get paid for this. And so there's this default thinking that like any request is a bad request, and that makes sense when you come in and then the CM goes, oh, the brand's paying Instrumental, I don't have to pay. That's great. And then our version of changing the world on that is we're getting in to help the CMs improve their own costs.
Yeah. Now
putting in place core infrastructure that can collaborate, for example, with yours, and make this data sharing just easier than it was before. So it's no longer this is definitely going to cost me way more to even listen to this request. I need to quickly come up with a reason why I obviously can't do it, right?
Yeah, let's maybe get really specific about the types of data that would be most valuable for various kind of AI systems to get. Like if we were going to, let's say we're going to drop the wall between the brands and the EMS. like what data actually could they respectively benefit from. So certainly the types of data that Instrumental's technology, which is really about how can we identify issues that we early enough in the process that we can change them in design and just design them out, or if it's in production, how can we quickly identify continuous improvement opportunities and then help you manage those changes that you're making so that you can improve your yields in production. So for those things, the types of data that we're generally trying to get are images of key states of assembly. So that's like very intimate data from the line, functional test results data, other information they might collect about kitting, like what was in the bill of materials in these particular units. Sometimes there's an aspiration for like, which operator at a key step that was, very fiddly, that maybe it really matters if it was operator A or B. But those are the types of information that the brand is interested in getting from the factory, and then combining with their own know-how plus their design files and like what the idealized states are and the drawings and that kind of thing. They put all that data together and they're using that to create those insights. What data do you think the EMS would like to get from either the brand side or where you could see more collaboration that would like impact opportunities there?
So I'll start with the data that they're primarily interested in for their own benefit, and then how that extends to like what do they not have, as you shared. So they're primarily interested in things related to downtimes, deviations, and their on-time delivery. And to the extent they can hit on-time delivery, can I then optimize behind that to spend less money while I'm still being on time? Do I have a benefit from delivering 2 days early? But I can't be late, right? And so, things about cycle times in machines, error codes, process parameter data when they might get out of a window and then have to do a repair, so they're spending repair time hours, scrap rates where maybe they have a contract, they just have to deliver 1,000 good units. How many scrap do I go through to get to 1,000 good units, right?
That's part of the information they don't want the brand to know.
Right.
The brand is worried that actually, like, these 100 units, you had to build 1,000 to get me 100 units.
And, maybe one of these issues I think a lot of the interesting ones are at that intersection that are a little uncomfortable to talk about. Something that the factory would like to do is, for example, reduce test times.
Yes.
Because test times
cost money.
Very expensive. And we often find when we're helping customers, it's not always the bottleneck, but it's a very common bottleneck that a specific test has gotten high. In fact, you may really get this example. Sometimes it started out, they had a good line balance. They got a complaint from the customer, for example. They increased test coverage,
added additional test items.
Added test items at a specific step. And now this has become a huge bottleneck. And other machines in the process and labor is being used, and it's not being it's not going to work, and the throughput is lower because it's bottlenecks at the test station. Sometimes there's just silly things we fix where like you increase that for another customer and you manage to kind of affect everything else that's going through the same line or process, and it was unnecessary. Other times it's like, could you have worked with the customer to figure out other ways to guarantee you were having good quality without bottlenecking the line? Imagine that they felt comfortable sharing. It wasn't scared it was going to get to their costs, but here's how you've impacted my throughput. How else could we get to quality? And maybe they would have to share other data.
I mean, even sharing some of those costs, like the customer, like their customer, the brand is also interested in reducing test time. Because often the equipment itself is a CapEx expense. Sometimes it's custom. And if you have throughput problems, you have to get additional testing equipment. And certainly teams are very interested in reducing test items. And could we use visual AI or other technologies? If we know it's built correctly, maybe we then don't need to test its function or as many items in the function. So we can be a little bit more targeted. And it's one of the use cases of Instrumental is actually strip test out to be able to, because it's cheaper to do so if you can have fewer tests or set limits that are smarter, like that are actually based on more than fear tolerancing, since I used to be an engineer who fear tolerance the hell out of my parts. Like figuring out that actually like these tolerances are tight and causing fallout and not actually required, or maybe this test isn't even required in the first place. So this is an area of like common ground between both sides that I think both sides could get behind around. Like if we could share our data, could we actually just reduce the amount of test coverage without any reduction in the ultimate quality or the risk of what we're producing?
Something else, tell me if this goes even beyond what you were thinking, but there's the, how many functional testers do I have? How many steps do I have further up the line, for example, at ICT, flying probe? And then there's also the environmental and the bacon tests and the ones that take just a long time. And like, how can I figure out how quickly, again, I can move the product in? And, I wonder, maybe it's a question to you, like, how do brands feel about sharing even some more of their field data, right? As it relates back to design, if that's any conversation that you've had.
That's assuming they have field data, which is another like super valuable data set. But unless you are a FANG company, like an Apple with their own stores and your own Apple Care kind of set up an infrastructure, if you're selling through Best Buy as your channel, you're getting no data. You have to send it back to a return repo to actually be able to run through a test line there to have any hope of like, maybe it was returned for this, maybe it wasn't. But there can be a lot of value in actually learning from the field to influence the design upstream. So the customers who have implemented data collection there, you can also look at like Amazon reviews for your product and sentiment review. But
well, you and I are also in the like AI server and the defense space as well. And I think we both talked a bit. We see opportunities there too, where there's a real, like in the defense space, the government is now mandating types of digital thread data on their products as it goes through. So this has to be required. And if that data can be, shared down the chain from these brand customer relationships to the factories, that's a real, again, opportunity where if they can work together, at the end of the day, how do we ship high quality product on time quickly? And the CM cares a little more about the resource efficiency side of quick, and the brand, I think their time to market and overall quality being key to customer satisfaction and returns in the field. But those goals are definitely joined, and if it comes back to new ways to reduce test time, because you can leverage software and AI to understand. Again, on our side, an example was we went to a factory, this one was in Europe, and they had this was all the way up on the SMT line. Every single time they would do, when you do a first article, you pass through the line, doing something brand new, you often stop the line and really validate it. They were doing these stops for validation all the time, not even on first articles. And a prior customer had mandated this, and they had just been like, okay, I think this is the practice that we had to do. They were scared, and they wanted to serve the customer well. And we were able to help them think about, how do you look at the data across the line and know that your process parameters have not deviated, that you're running as you would expect, so you can pass through these validations, which are not mandated by the customer. Wouldn't it be great if you could have those conversations just directly between brands and CMs, instead of kind of both on their side of the door? And say, let's increase throughput here, right?
Yeah, I would say that if we're thinking about, okay, we've like established that there's discomfort in sharing this data, and then it's maybe a little bit of a holdover, but like the future is going to be analyzing this data. I really don't think there's anybody on this floor here at IPC Apex who thinks the future does not involve some use of their manufacturing data into some kind of computationally intensive system that's going to come up with useful insights about what they should be doing to optimize it. I think we're like beyond that skepticism, and now it's just about, the skepticism is how fast it's going to get here and how to implement it. So it's clearly going to be all about data. And I think, the title of what we want to talk about was the unfair advantages that sharing has that like can maybe break through some of the discomfort that both sides might have about it. And so, there's, I think, a lot of opportunities for significant improvements in manufacturing metrics that both sides really benefit from. And you mentioned like both sides just like want to make money, and it's very interesting even across where it's like literally the same EMS, but they provide a service to a customer and consumer, which has been super low margin NRE for them. Like they don't make their money off of MPI. They make their money off of production. So for them, an MPI, it's all about getting to production as fast as possible. Not doing a DVT2 or a DVT3 or like extra builds that delay production is good for them. And then getting there with the highest possible maturity product that's going to be the easiest to like control. They like, if you understand it, all the things you need to control. And so by sharing the data more openly with their customer and MPI, the engineers, who I used to be, can actually figure out how to design things out of the product that will be problems down the line in production.
Yeah.
It's so much better to fix it in design than to manage that issue forever. And so you can do that very early in MPI. And then as MPI goes along, by proactively finding problems in the data that the data is telling you, by actually being able to take your onesie, twosie failures when you're only building 100 units, you might only have 2 failures, but when you're building 10,000 units a day, that 2% failure rate's way too big. And so being able to actually make those units strong, like that, the data around those units can actually teach you something about how to change the design or change the process or what to automate or where to invest, makes it so that you get to the end with a way more mature product. So we had a customer that actually calculated the maturity of the product at ramp as being 6 weeks more mature using instrumental than on programs that didn't use instrumental. So essentially it was the same point of maturity they get to after ramping for 6 weeks, which if you're ramping for 6 weeks during that period of time at like suboptimal yields, you're like spending a lot of money.
Yes.
And so eliminating that process and pushing all of that into NPI is valuable for both sides because they both make their money in production.
Yeah.
And so that's like an example of where sharing that data and being a little bit more open about it, not being so worried about it, can actually result in better business. And then certainly I think, for the EMS providers who are like, well, this is my secret sauce, like how I build is my IP. I have questions about how your IP agreements are set up, like the design of the product, like what is my IP as the EMS provider? And I think the IP is their knowledge on how to make the product, get to the yields, and manage the process and continuously improve and make it profitable. And that's where their IP is. It's not in like, here's what the product looks like at stage 5 of the assembly process. And so I think being really cognizant of where the IP actually is and where your value is with your customer can help to dispel some of the misgivings around like how much data to share, whether I'm going to share. Because we've certainly run into customers where their CM was like, no, and the customer, ultimately went into another CM because CM, I'm not claiming just for instrumental, but like it is a demonstration of a CM that is unwilling to work with their customer to like try to make a better product. May not be very competitive in the marketplace for very long, even if they are today.
Well, maybe I can comment, you asked like, where is the CM's IP? And it's interesting to think about where it was and where it is and where it's going, because that's really changing. And this is one of the things that is challenging to adapt and meet the rising change of things. So in the past, was the IP in how to actually design products? There were points where it was.
There probably was, yeah.
And I'm thinking about, I was in Poland not too long ago on a line building 5G products.
Okay.
And I was walking with the engineer on the SMT mid-end, back-end. We were walking through, and he how to design the product. And I was blown away because you don't usually see that. Because that's the past. That's not what is the IP of the CM today. And I asked him, and he said, actually, I have an NDA with the brand because he was a special person. And it really stuck out to me because that's not common. That was the past where the brand might say, we have this idea, and it's not that the CMs don't get involved. Each of the different CMs have their, I think Jabil likes to say like, dust to design, and Flex has got their sketch to scale, and they've got their different frameworks that they can really help you through that phase. But especially when we're talking about big enterprises, Apple that you used to come from, of course, many others, they're just absolutely exceptional at design. That is their IP. And okay, where was the manufacturer's IP today, but not where it's going? So it used to be a more about design, and it shifted to how do I make use of resources for execution. So how do I make advantage of material margin and labor margin and use all the, know how to operate these machines, for example. I know best in the world how to click the buttons on the screen and understand this machine. They're hard. And so a lot of it went into the expertise of their team. Now they're facing another change, which is they're losing that expertise on the team. And that's going into AI. And this idea that this is where the fear, the data leads to AI. And so if I share the data, if now other people have the expertise of how to optimize test time, okay, maybe the brand could take that to another CM, but this is the reality that is shifting. And the IP of the manufacturer is actually becoming a lot how well they use data itself.
Yeah.
How they leverage data and resources. And the ones, I'll say Flex and Jabil, that are doing a great job of this, when you ask Flex and Jabil, what's unique about your company? They say, I'm a supply chain company, not I'm a manufacturer.
Yeah.
And they say, in this world with tariffs and everything else, I can move you from A to B and get you up faster than anyone else. I can split you here and here. I can give you data. They will say this, but they often mean a little more the ERP and not the details of the test machines, right? But I can give you data about where your products are, where the components are coming from. I can work with you on the data plane. And so they are primed now for this next phase, which is my actual expertise is how well I leverage AI.
Yeah.
And I think that is the big opening to say,
really be like early adopters of these
To
tools
be early adopters.
and not laggards.
And they don't want the brand now to be faster than them at using AI to tell their operator how to fix a machine per se. But how about leveraging AI together to know we can actually reduce the test time, we can shift test into different places to get throughput. That, I think, exactly becomes what should be their differentiation in this new phase.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for joining us for this conversation.
Happy to do it. It was great.
Yeah. All right.
Syncro. Join the revolution. Non-stop selective soldering. Increase UPH. Reduce maintenance. Small footprint. Contact us today for